February 6, 2011, Arlington, Texas. The roof of Cowboy Stadium is closed, but inside, the noise has its own weather. Green and gold on one side, black and gold on the other. The Green Bay Packers against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Super Bowl 45. And standing under center, with the game tied at 21 in the fourth quarter, is a man who waited longer than anyone thought possible for this moment. His name is Aaron Rodgers. He is 27 years old. 3 years ago, he was the most doubted starting quarterback in the National Football League. The man who had the audacity to replace a legend. Brett Favre's shadow did not just loom over Green Bay. It lived there. It had a statue. It had a retired number. It had an entire generation of fans who believed the Packers died the day Favre left. And here was Rodgers, the quiet kid from California who sat on the bench for 3 years, watching, learning, saying almost nothing. The fans booed him. The radio hosts questioned him. The comparisons never stopped. Now he stands in the biggest stadium in football, 70,000 people screaming, and the Steelers, a franchise with 6 Lombardi trophies, a defense built on violence and pride, are daring him to make a mistake. He has not made many. Not tonight. Not all season. His arm is a weapon of surgical precision, threading passes into windows that do not seem to exist until the ball arrives. He reads defenses the way a chess grandmaster reads the board. Not reacting, but anticipating, seeing the move before it happens, punishing it before the defense knows it has been punished. On this night, he will throw for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns. He will not throw an interception. He will be named the most valuable player of the Super Bowl. And when the confetti falls, he will stand on that field with a look that is not joy. Exactly, it is something closer to vindication, something closer to proof, as if he has been carrying a weight for years and has finally quietly set it down. But here is what the confetti does not tell you. That Super Bowl was supposed to be the beginning. It was supposed to be the first of many. Aaron Rodgers had the arm, the mind, the precision, the supporting cast, and the franchise. He had everything a quarterback needs to build a dynasty. And yet, that night in Arlington would be the only Super Bowl he ever won, the only one he ever reached. What followed was a career of brilliance wrapped in frustration, of individual greatness colliding with team heartbreak, of a mind so sharp it cut everything around it, including, sometimes, the people closest to him. By the end of tonight, you're going to understand not just how talented Aaron Rodgers was, but why the most gifted quarterback of his generation became the most complicated. Why the man who could see every route, every blitz, every coverage shell with perfect clarity became, off the field, a mystery even to the people who knew him best. This is the story of a genius who could solve any defense but could not solve himself. Before we get started, if you find these stories as moving as we do, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It is a simple action, but it helps this channel reach more people who appreciate the legends of the game. Now let's begin. To understand what Aaron Rodgers meant to the quarterback position, you have to understand what the position was before him, and how it changed into something he would eventually master more completely than almost anyone alive. The quarterback, as a concept, is older than the forward pass itself. In the earliest days of American football, the man who received the snap from center was little more than a ball handler, a traffic director in a leather helmet whose job was to hand the ball to someone bigger and faster. The forward pass was not legalized until 1906, and even then, most coaches treated it as a desperation move, a trick play for the losing team. For decades, the quarterback was measured by his ability to manage a game, to not lose it. Winning was the running back's job. The quarterback just had to stay out of the way. That began to change in 1943, when a wiry passer named Sid Luckman threw 7 touchdown passes in a single game for the Chicago Bears. It was a number so absurd for its time that people assumed it was a fluke. It was not. Luckman was showing the league something it did not want to see, that a quarterback with accuracy and intelligence could break a game open without ever handing the ball off. But the league was slow to listen. Through the 1940s and 50s, the running game still reigned. Quarterbacks like Bobby Lane and Norm Van Brocklin were respected, but the position did not carry the mythology it would later inherit. Then came Johnny Unitas, and everything shifted. Unitas, who played for the Baltimore Colts beginning in 1956, did not just throw the football. He commanded the field. He stood in the pocket with a stillness that bordered on defiance, waiting until the last possible moment to release the ball, absorbing punishment that would have broken lesser men. In the 1958 NFL Championship game, a contest often called the greatest game ever played, Unitas led a drive in sudden death overtime that gave professional football its first true national moment. Millions watched on television, and what they saw was not just a game. They saw a man who controlled chaos. Unitas threw for more than 40,000 yards in his career, a staggering number for the era. He held the record for consecutive games with a touchdown pass, 47, for more than 50 years. He was the prototype. Every quarterback who came after him was, in some way, trying to be Johnny Unitas. But the prototype evolved. In the 1960s and 70s, the position split into archetypes. There were the gunslingers, Joe Namath, with his fur coats and rocket arm, who guaranteed a Super Bowl victory and delivered it. There were the field generals, Roger Staubach, who ran the Dallas Cowboys offense with military discipline, literally. He had served in Vietnam before playing professional football, and there were the improvisers, Fran Tarkenton, who scrambled behind the line of scrimmage like a man being chased by bees, turning broken plays into first downs through sheer refusal to go down. Each of these men expanded the definition of what a quarterback could be, but none of them fully merged every dimension of the position into one player. That would not happen until the 1980s, when two men, one on each coast, redefined the position in ways that would echo for decades. Joe Montana, playing for the San Francisco 49ers under head coach Bill Walsh, became the embodiment of precision passing. Walsh's West Coast offense was a system built on timing, rhythm, and short, accurate throws that functioned almost like an extension of the running game. Montana was its perfect instrument. He did not have the strongest arm. He did not have the fastest legs. But he had something that could not be coached, an internal clock that told him exactly when to throw, exactly where to throw, and exactly how much force to put on the ball. He won 4 Super Bowls. He never threw an interception in a Super Bowl. His passer rating in the biggest games was otherworldly. Montana proved that the quarterback could be a surgeon, precise, calm, lethal. On the other side of the country, Dan Marino was proving the opposite. Marino, playing for the Miami Dolphins, had the most violent release the position had ever seen. His arm was a cannon, and he fired it without hesitation. In 1984, his second season, Marino threw for 5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns, numbers so far ahead of his era that they seemed like they belonged to a different sport. No one would match those totals for nearly 20 years. Marino proved that a quarterback could win through sheer force of will and arm talent. That volume and aggression could be just as devastating as precision. Montana or Marino, precision or power, system or talent. For a generation, that was the debate. And the quarterbacks who followed, Troy Aikman, Steve Young, John Elway, Brett Favre, all fell somewhere on that spectrum. Young was Montana with athleticism. Elway was Marino with legs. Favre was a gunslinger who played with the joy of a kid and the recklessness of a gambler, throwing passes that should not have worked and making them look inevitable. But by the late 1990s and early 2000s, the position was evolving again. Peyton Manning arrived in Indianapolis in 1998 and brought something no quarterback before him had possessed to such a degree: intellectual dominance. Manning did not just read defenses, he dissected them. He stood at the line of scrimmage and changed plays based on what he saw, calling audibles, pre-snap adjustments shouted to his teammates with such frequency and accuracy that opposing coordinators felt like their playbooks had been stolen. Manning turned the quarterback into a coach on the field, a man who was essentially calling his own plays in real time. He threw for more than 71,000 yards in his career. He won 2 Super Bowls. He was named Most Valuable Player of the League 5 times, and he did it with an arm that was, by most accounts, merely average in terms of pure strength. His weapon was his mind. Tom Brady, drafted in the 6th round in 2,199th overall, proved something different entirely. Brady showed that a quarterback with limited athletic gifts, a slow 40-yard dash time, and a body that scouts graded as below average could become the greatest winner the sport had ever seen. If he had the right preparation, the right system, and an almost pathological refusal to lose. Brady won 7 Super Bowls across 23 seasons. He threw for more than 89,000 yards. His longevity was unprecedented. His clutch performances, the 25-point comeback against the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 51, bordered on the supernatural. Brady proved that the quarterback position was not just about talent, it was about will. And then there was Aaron Rodgers. And Rodgers was something the position had never quite produced before. He was not Montana, though he had Montana's precision. He was not Marino, though he had Marino's arm strength. He was not Manning, though he had Manning's ability to read a defense. He was not Brady, though he had Brady's competitive fury. Rodgers was all of these things, fused into a single player, operating at a level of technical mastery that made the position look like it had been invented for him. His release was the fastest the league had ever seen. A flick of the wrist that sent the ball spinning on a perfect spiral before defenders could react. His accuracy was surgical, not just in the short and intermediate game, but on deep throws, on off-platform throws, on throws made while rolling to his left with a 300-pound lineman dragging him down. He could throw sidearm, he could throw across his body, he could throw off one foot, falling away, with a defender in his face, and put the ball exactly where only his receiver could catch it. His touchdown-to-interception ratio was, for years, the best in the history of professional football. He did not just avoid mistakes. He seemed incapable of making them. The arm was extraordinary, but it was the mind that separated him. Rodgers saw the field the way a conductor hears an orchestra. Every moving piece, every developing pattern, every defender's lean and hip angle, processed in fractions of a second. He manipulated safeties with his eyes, looking left to move a defender out of position, then throwing right into the vacated space before anyone realized what had happened. He used hard counts, fake snap signals designed to draw the defense offside, more effectively than any quarterback in history, turning free plays into deep touchdowns with a trick that every other quarterback attempted but none executed with his consistency. He was, in the most literal sense of the word, a genius playing a position that rewarded intelligence more than any other in professional sports. The evolution of the quarterback position, from ball handler to passer to field general to intellectual weapon, had been building toward a player like Rodgers for nearly a century. He was the culmination, the final form, and yet, for all of that brilliance, the story of Aaron Rodgers is not a story of fulfillment. It is a story of potential that was both realized and wasted at the same time, of a player who had everything except the one thing he seemed to want most. And that contradiction is where the real story begins. He grew up in Chico, California, a small college town in the Sacramento Valley, far from the football factories of Texas and Florida. His father, Ed Rodgers, had played offensive line at Chico State. Football was in the house, it was in the blood. Aaron was the middle of 3 brothers, and from the time he could grip a ball, he threw it differently than other kids. Harder, straighter, with a natural spiral that coaches noticed before he even reached high school. At Pleasant Valley High School, Rodgers was a good quarterback, not a great one, at least not in the eyes of the recruiting services that determined which teenagers deserved scholarships and which did not. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, which was considered short for a Division I prospect. He weighed barely 185 pounds. He had a strong arm but played in a run-first offense that did not showcase it. When he graduated in 2002, not a single Division I program offered him a scholarship, not one. The University of California at Berkeley, which was less than 3 hours from his hometown, did not recruit him. Neither did any school in the Pacific 10 Conference. The big programs looked at Aaron Rodgers and saw an undersized kid from a small town with good mechanics and no resume. So he did something that most future Hall of Famers do not do. He enrolled at Butte Community College, a 2-year school in Oroville, California, about 20 minutes from Chico. He played 1 season there. He threw 28 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He led the team to a 10-1 record. and he caught the eye of Jeff Tedford, the head coach at Cal Berkeley, who happened to watch film of a Butte game while scouting a different player entirely. Tedford saw Rodgers throw 3 passes on that film and offered him a scholarship. At Cal, Rodgers became a star. In his first full season as a starter, in 2003, he led the Bears to a 7-3 record while throwing 19 touchdowns and just 5 interceptions. The following year, in 2004, he was even better. 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a passer rating that ranked among the best in the nation. Cal finished 10-2. Rodgers was projected as a top pick in the 2005 NFL Draft. Some analysts had him going first overall. Sports Illustrated put him on their cover. He was the golden boy, the small-town kid who had climbed from community college to the top of every draft board in America. And then came draft night, April 23, 2005. And what happened in New York City that evening would shape Aaron Rodgers for the rest of his life. The San Francisco 49ers held the first overall pick. They were Rodgers' hometown team, or close enough. He had grown up rooting for them. He expected to be their quarterback. Most experts expected it too. But the 49ers chose Alex Smith, a quarterback from the University of Utah. Rodgers was not the pick. He sat in the green room at the Javits Center, surrounded by cameras, wearing a dark suit, and waited. Pick after pick went by. Quarterbacks were selected, running backs, defensive ends, wide receivers, players he had never heard of, players who were not on his level, and the cameras stayed on him, capturing every shift in his chair, every tight smile, every long exhale. It was one of the most public humiliations in the history of the NFL Draft. 23 teams passed on Aaron Rodgers. 23 teams looked at his film, his numbers, his arm, his mind, and chose someone else. The Green Bay Packers, picking 24th, finally called his name. But even that was complicated. Green Bay already had a quarterback. They had Favre, a 3-time most valuable player, a Super Bowl champion, a living legend who had started 223 consecutive games and showed no signs of stopping. Rodgers was not being drafted to play. He was being drafted to wait, to sit behind the most beloved player in franchise history and learn, to be patient. And it gets harder. For 3 seasons, 2005, 2006, 2007, Rodgers stood on the sideline. He held a clipboard. He ran the scout team in practice, playing the role of the opposing quarterbacks so Green Bay's defense could prepare. He studied film for hours every day. He rebuilt his throwing mechanics under the guidance of quarterback coach Tom Clements, shortening his release, adjusting his footwork, refining the motion that would one day become the most efficient in professional football. He did all of this in silence, while the fans chanted Favre's name and the media debated whether Rodgers would ever be good enough. Then, in the spring of 2008, the situation combusted. Favre retired, then he unretired, then he demanded a trade. The saga consumed the entire offseason, splitting the fan base, generating daily headlines, turning the Green Bay Packers into a soap opera. Favre was eventually traded to the New York Jets, and Rodgers, finally, after 3 years, was named the starting quarterback. The doubters were loud. Favre's supporters were furious. Talk radio in Wisconsin was ruthless. The prevailing sentiment was simple. Aaron Rodgers is not Brett Favre, and Green Bay will regret this. His first season as a starter, in 2008, was good, not great. 4,038 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, a 6-10 record. The Packers missed the playoffs. The critics felt vindicated. They were wrong, but they did not know it yet. In 2009, Rodgers improved. 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, an 11-5 record, a playoff appearance. He was showing flashes of something extraordinary, a precision and a creativity that went beyond anything Favre had done. But the Packers lost in the wild-card round to the Arizona Cardinals in overtime after Rodgers threw for 423 yards and 4 touchdowns in a performance that deserved a win and did not get one. Then came 2010, and everything changed. The Packers started the season 6-0, then they lost, and lost again, and again. By late November, they were 8-4, and their margin for error had disappeared. Rodgers had been battered all season. He played through a concussion, through knee and calf injuries that limited his mobility, through a stretch where his offensive line could not protect him. But something had shifted in him. The precision was still there, but now there was an edge, a fury, a refusal to let the season slip away. He threw for 3,922 yards and 28 touchdowns that regular season. His passer rating was 101.2. Good numbers, but numbers do not capture what happened next. Green Bay entered the playoffs as a wildcard team, the 6th seed, the lowest-ranked team in the NFC bracket. They had to win on the road. In the wildcard round, they went to Philadelphia and dismantled the Eagles, 32-21. In the divisional round, they went to Atlanta, the top seed in the NFC, and destroyed the Falcons, 48-21. Rodgers threw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. In the NFC Championship game, they traveled to Chicago to face the Bears, a rivalry as old as the league itself, and won 21-14. 3 road playoff wins, each one dominant, each one featuring a quarterback who looked like he was playing a different sport than everyone around him. And then came the Super Bowl. Pittsburgh, the Steelers, 6 Lombardi trophies, a defense led by Troy Polamalu and James Harrison that had been terrorizing offenses all season. The Steelers were not just an opponent, they were a test. The kind of opponent that separates great quarterbacks from the ones who merely accumulate statistics in comfortable conditions. Rodgers passed the test. He threw for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did not throw an interception. He managed the game with the poise of a 15-year veteran, not a man playing in his first Super Bowl. The Packers won, 31-25. Rodgers was named the game's most valuable player. He was 27 years old. He had won the Super Bowl in his 3rd year as a starter, after waiting 3 years behind Favre, after being passed over 23 times on draft night, after hearing for half a decade that he was not good enough. But here's what makes this story unforgettable. That night in Arlington, the night the confetti fell and the trophy was lifted, was not the beginning of a dynasty. It was the peak, the single highest point on a mountain that Aaron Rodgers would spend the next 13 years trying to climb again, and he never would. The 2011 season that followed toward the Super Bowl victory was, statistically, one of the greatest individual quarterback seasons in the history of professional football. The Packers opened the year against the New Orleans Saints, the defending NFC South champions, and Rodgers threw for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns in a dominant win. It set the tone. Over the next 15 games, Green Bay did not lose. They ran the table, 15-1 in the regular season, the best record in the NFL, the best record the Packers had posted in decades. Rodgers was not just good that year, he was operating on a plane that quarterbacks rarely reach. He threw for 4,643 yards, 45 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. His passer rating for the season was 122.5, the highest single-season passer rating in NFL history at the time, a number so absurd it seemed like a typographical error. To understand what that means, consider that a passer rating of anything above 100 is considered excellent. Above 110 is elite. Above 120 had never been done across a full season. Rodgers did not just break the record, he obliterated it. He was named the most valuable player of the NFL. It was unanimous. No other player received a single vote. The Packers were the clear Super Bowl favorites. The path back to the championship seemed inevitable. And then, in the divisional round of the playoffs, Green Bay hosted the New York Giants. The Packers were at Lambeau Field, their home fortress, where the cold was supposed to be their ally and the crowd was supposed to be their 12th man. It was January 15th, 2012. The temperature at kickoff was hovered around the low 20s. The Packers were favored by more than a touchdown. The Giants won 37-20. It was not close. Rodgers threw for 264 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The offense sputtered. The defense could not stop Giants quarterback Eli Manning, who played one of the best road playoff games of his career. The greatest regular season by a quarterback in NFL history ended with a loss at home in the divisional round. This would become a pattern, a devastating, recurring, almost cruel pattern. In 2012, Rodgers threw for 39 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, leading the Packers to an 11-5 record. In the divisional round, they lost to the 49ers, 45-31. In 2013, Rodgers broke his collarbone in a November game against the Bears and missed 7 weeks. He returned for the season finale, a win-and-you're-in scenario, and threw for 318 yards in a victory over the Bears that clinched the division. But in the wild card round, the Packers lost to the 49ers again, 23-20. Each year the talent was there, the arm was there, the mind was there, the results were not. In 2014, Rodgers was magnificent again. 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a passer rating of 112.2. He was named the most valuable player for the second time. The Packers finished 12-4 and earned the second seed in the NFC. In the divisional round, they beat the Cowboys 26-21, with Rodgers throwing for 316 yards. The NFC Championship game was set. Green Bay at Seattle against the Seahawks, the defending Super Bowl champions, in a stadium so loud it had been measured on seismographs during games. And what happened in Seattle on January 18, 2015, was one of the most devastating losses in NFL history. Green Bay dominated the first 3 quarters. They led 19-7 late in the third quarter. The Seahawks' offense was lifeless. Russell Wilson had thrown 4 interceptions. 4. The Packers had the ball, the lead, and the momentum. The Super Bowl was within reach. Rodgers could feel it. The entire team could feel it. Then Seattle woke up. A 2-point conversion. An onside kick that bounced off the hands of a Packers player and into the arms of a Seahawk. A touchdown. Another touchdown. In the final 3 minutes of regulation, Seattle scored 15 points. The game went to overtime. The Seahawks won 28-22 on a Russell Wilson touchdown pass on the first possession of overtime. Green Bay's defense had collapsed, but the wound cut deeper than that. Rodgers had not played his best in the second half. The offense had gone conservative, trying to protect the lead instead of extending it. The decision-making, by coaches, by coordinators, by the entire organization, had been cautious when boldness was required. Rodgers stood on the sideline as Seattle celebrated, and the expression on his face was not shock. It was something worse. It was recognition. It was the look of a man who has seen the thing he wants most taken from him and understands with terrible clarity that he may not get another chance like this. The numbers are striking. Between 2011 and 2016, Aaron Rodgers led the Green Bay Packers to at least 10 wins in 5 of 6 seasons. He was named MVP twice. He was named to the All-Pro team multiple times. He posted a career passer rating during that stretch that exceeded 105, a number that would be the envy of virtually every quarterback in history. And he won exactly 0 Super Bowls in that span, 0 NFC Championship games. The Packers lost in the divisional round, or the conference championship, or, in the cruelest scenarios, in overtime, with the game within reach. This is the paradox that defines Aaron Rodgers' career. He was too good to miss the playoffs, and he was surrounded by a supporting cast that was not good enough to win it all. The Packers front office, led by general manager Ted Thompson and later Brian Gutekunst, operated under a philosophy of building through the draft and maintaining salary cap discipline. It was a sound approach in theory. In practice, it meant that Rodgers rarely had the kind of defensive talent or receiving weapons that other elite quarterbacks enjoyed. While Tom Brady played with the defensive genius of Bill Belichick, and Peyton Manning played with historically good defenses in his championship seasons, Rodgers carried an offense that was often his burden alone. His wide receivers were good, sometimes excellent, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Davante Adams, but his defense was, in many of his peak years, mediocre or worse. The 2016 season crystallized this tension in a single phrase. After a 4-6 start, the Packers' season appeared dead. Rodgers, in a press conference, looked into the camera and said one word that became a rallying cry, RELAX. Actually, that had been from 2014. In 2016, the phrase was different. After the 4-6 start, Rodgers told reporters the team could run the table, win every remaining game, and make the playoffs. It sounded delusional. 6 straight wins to close the season, against a schedule that included division rivals and playoff caliber opponents. They did it. 6 straight wins. Rodgers threw for 15 touchdowns and 2 interceptions over that stretch. The Packers clinched a wild-card berth and won their first playoff game. Then, in the NFC Championship, They traveled to Atlanta to face the Falcons, a team that had scored more points than any other in the regular season, led by an offense that was averaging over 33 points per game. Rodgers threw for 387 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was not enough. The Falcons won, 44-21. Once again, the defense could not hold. Once again, Rodgers' brilliance was not enough to overcome the imbalance. There were moments of magic that transcended the frustration. On December 3rd, 2015, during a Thursday night game against the Detroit Lions, Rodgers stood on his own 39-yard line with no time left on the clock. The Packers trailed by 2. The play was a desperation heave, a Hail Mary, a prayer thrown 61 yards into a crowd of bodies in the end zone. Rodgers launched the ball into the Detroit night. It hung in the air for what felt like a full minute, and it came down in the hands of tight end Richard Rodgers, who caught it as time expired. Touchdown. Packers win. The stadium erupted. Aaron Rodgers ran down the field, helmet off, arms raised, and for one moment, the weight of the lost championships and the organizational shortcomings and the impossible expectations disappeared. There was only the ball, the arm, and the impossible made real. He did it again. 2 weeks later, against the Arizona Cardinals, in the divisional round of the playoffs, the game was tied with seconds remaining. Rodgers scrambled to his right, threw across his body while being hit, and delivered a Hail Mary that traveled over 60 yards into the end zone and was caught by Jeff Jamal. The game went to overtime. The Hail Mary itself was perhaps the most athletically extraordinary throw in NFL history, off-platform, across the body, under duress, with the season on the line. Arizona eventually won in overtime, but the throw endured. It was proof of something that went beyond statistics. Aaron Rodgers could do things with a football that no other human being on the planet could do. In 2020, at age 37, Rodgers produced what many consider his most complete season. He threw for 4,299 yards and 48 touchdowns, with only 5 interceptions. His passer rating was 121.5, nearly matching his record-setting 2011 season. He was named the most valuable player of the NFL for the 3rd time. Davante Adams, his primary receiver, caught 115 passes for 1,374 yards. The partnership between the two was perhaps the most precise quarterback-receiver combination in the league. The Packers finished 13-3. They earned the top seed in the NFC and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. The NFC Championship game was played at Lambeau Field in January in the cold. Everything Green Bay could want. Their opponent was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, led by Tom Brady, who had left the New England Patriots and joined Tampa the previous offseason. Brady versus Rodgers, the two greatest quarterbacks of their generation, face-to-face for a trip to the Super Bowl. The stage could not have been more dramatic, and once again, the game slipped through Green Bay's fingers. The Buccaneers won, 31-26. Rodgers threw for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he also threw 1 interception and made a critical decision late in the game, choosing to throw to Adams in tight coverage rather than looking for an open receiver elsewhere. That resulted in an incompletion on a crucial 3rd down. The Packers settled for a field goal when they needed a touchdown. Brady moved the Buccaneers down the field. Tampa Bay advanced to the Super Bowl. Brady would win his 7th ring. Rodgers would watch from home. The 2021 season was nearly a carbon copy. Rodgers threw for 4,115 yards and 37 touchdowns with 4 interceptions. He won his 4th Most Valuable Player award, joining an exclusive club that included only Peyton Manning and Brett Favre. The Packers finished 13-4 and again earned the top seed. Again, they hosted a home playoff game. Again, they lost, this time to the San Francisco 49ers, 13-10, in a game where Rodgers was held to 225 yards, and the special teams unit committed errors so catastrophic that they became the defining image of the Packers' season. 4 MVP awards, 1 Super Bowl. The dissonance between individual excellence and team achievement was now impossible to ignore. It hung over every conversation about Rodgers, every debate about his legacy, every comparison to Brady and Manning and Montana. The question was no longer whether he was talented enough. The question was why the talent was not translating into championships. And the answer was complicated. It involved organizational decisions, coaching, roster construction, bad luck, and yes, moments where Rodgers himself had not been at his absolute best when it mattered most. The truth was not simple, and anyone who told you it was, that it was all his fault or none of his fault, was not telling you the whole story. But away from the field, away from the raw and the records, there was a quieter story, one that the highlights never showed. In 2016, during a taping of a celebrity game show, Aaron Rodgers' younger brother Jordan publicly revealed that the family was estranged. Aaron had not spoken to his parents or his brothers in years. The revelation shocked the football world. Here was one of the most famous athletes on the planet, a man who earned tens of millions of dollars per year, who was adored by an entire state, who seemed to have everything, and he could not maintain a relationship with the people who raised him. The details were never fully explained. Rodgers, intensely private, refused to discuss it publicly. His family members spoke in fragments, interviews here, social media posts there, painting a picture of a fracture that had deepened over time. His father suggested that fame had changed Aaron. Aaron's silence suggested the opposite, that the distance was a boundary he had drawn deliberately, a decision rooted in something deeper than celebrity. Let that sink in. A man who could read an NFL defense in 2 seconds, who could process 22 moving bodies and find the open man before the rush arrived, could not, or would not, navigate the complexities of his own family. This is not a judgment. It is a truth. And it speaks to something fundamental about who Aaron Rodgers was and what the pursuit of excellence cost him. He was, by all accounts, an intensely private and deeply intellectual person. He read voraciously. He studied philosophy. He traveled to places most NFL players never visited: Peru, India, New Zealand, seeking experiences that had nothing to do with football. He practiced meditation and spoke openly about psychedelic experiences that he said expanded his consciousness and improved his performance. He engaged with ideas that were far outside the mainstream of professional sports culture, and he did so without apology. This intellectual curiosity was, in many ways, the same trait that made him extraordinary on the field, the same mind that could deconstruct a cover 2 defense and identify the soft spot in the zone before the ball was snapped, was the same mind that questioned authority, challenged conventional thinking, and refused to accept easy answers. On the field, this made him a genius. Off the field, it made him polarizing. In 2021, the polarization reached a new level. Rodgers, when asked during the pre-seasons whether he had been vaccinated against the virus that had shut down the world, answered that he had been immunized. It was a carefully chosen word, technically accurate, in Rodgers' view, because he had undergone an alternative treatment, but widely interpreted as a confirmation of vaccination. When it was later revealed that he had not received the standard vaccine, the backlash was severe. He was criticized by the media, by former teammates, by fans who felt misled. He defended himself on a podcast appearance, citing research he had done, experts he had consulted, alternative approaches he had explored. The episode was revealing, not because of the medical decision itself, but because of what it showed about Rodgers' relationship with trust and truth. He was a man who did his own research on everything: defensive schemes, philosophical frameworks, health protocols, and he trusted his own conclusions above those of institutions. On a football field, this made him unstoppable. In the broader world, it made him a lightning rod. The final chapter of his time in Green Bay was marked by frustration that had curdled into something close to resentment. In the 2020 draft, with Rodgers entering his late 30s and the team in desperate need of a wide receiver, the Packers used their first-round pick, the 26th overall selection, on quarterback Jordan Love. It was a direct echo of what the Packers had done in 2005, when they drafted Rodgers to eventually replace Favre. Now Rodgers was Favre. He was the aging legend being replaced before he was ready to leave. The irony was almost too perfect. Rodgers spent the 2020 offseason reportedly furious. He skipped voluntary workouts. He appeared on television talking about his future in cryptic terms. There were reports that he wanted to be traded to Denver, to Las Vegas, anywhere but Green Bay. The Packers, to their credit, convinced him to return. He responded with back-to-back MVP seasons, but the relationship was fractured. The trust was broken. By the spring of 2023, the divorce was final. Let that sink in. Aaron Rodgers spent 18 seasons with the Green Bay Packers. He won 4 MVP awards. He won a Super Bowl. He set franchise records in virtually every passing category. He was, by any measure, the greatest quarterback in the history of a franchise that had employed Bart Starr and Brett Favre. And he left not with a farewell tour or a ceremony at Lambeau, but with a trade demand and a press conference that felt more like a separation agreement than a celebration. He was sent to the New York Jets. It was supposed to be a final act, a chance to chase one more championship, to silence the critics who said he could not win the big one without Green Bay's system, to prove that his genius could travel. The Jets had not been to the playoffs in over a decade. Their fanbase was desperate. They needed a savior, and they believed Rodgers was him. On September 11th, 2023, in the first game of the season, under the lights of MetLife Stadium, with the Jets trailing the Buffalo Bills, Aaron Rodgers took a snap, dropped back, and was sacked by Buffalo defensive end Leonard Floyd. His left Achilles tendon ruptured. 4 snaps. His Jets career, the career that was supposed to rewrite his legacy, lasted 4 snaps. He was carted off the field, the stadium went silent, and the story became something different. The recovery took the full season. Rodgers, at age 40, underwent surgery and spent months in rehabilitation. He returned in 2024, but the magic was diminished. The arm was still capable of brilliance in flashes, but the mobility was gone, the protection was inconsistent, and the Jets, despite their investment in Rodgers, remained a losing team. The final seasons were not the triumphant conclusion anyone had imagined. They were the quiet, difficult end of a career that had promised more than it delivered in the only metric that the sport ultimately values most: championships. When you step back from the noise, from the MVP debates and the vaccination controversy and the family estrangement and the playoff losses, and look at Aaron Rodgers as a football player, the picture is astonishing. Over the course of his career, he threw for more than 59,000 yards. He threw 475 touchdown passes against just 105 interceptions. His career passer rating of 104.7 was, at the time of his final seasons, the highest in the history of the National Football League. Not the highest of his era, the highest ever, higher than Brady, higher than Manning, higher than Montana, higher than every single human being who has ever played the position since the forward pass was legalized over a century ago. He did this with 1 Super Bowl ring. 1. And that single ring, rather than diminishing his legacy, illuminates the most uncomfortable truth in professional football: that the sport's ultimate measure of greatness is a team achievement, and the most brilliant individual to ever play the most important position was, more often than not, let down by the institution around him. Or perhaps, and this is the part that honest observers must sit with, there were moments when he let himself down, too. Games where the interception came at the worst time. Drives where the check down to the open man was ignored in favor of the hero throw that never arrived. Relationships with coaches and front offices that eroded because the same uncompromising intelligence that made him a genius on the field made him difficult to manage off it. He played in an era that demanded quarterbacks be everything: arm, mind, legs, leadership, media presence, brand, and he was almost everything. The almost is what haunts. The almost is what separates his legacy from the handful of men who sit above him in the sports mythology. He was not Brady, who sacrificed everything for winning. He was not Manning, who merged cerebral dominance with an ability to elevate those around him. He was Aaron Rodgers, more talented than both of them, and yet somehow less fulfilled than either. The franchise he left behind will remember him with complicated affection. Green Bay loved him the way you love someone you cannot quite understand, with admiration, with frustration, with a lingering sense that you never truly knew them. The moments of magic were so extraordinary that they transcend statistics: the Hail Marys, the hard counts, the impossible throws on 3rd and long that kept drives alive and seasons breathing. Those moments belong to Green Bay forever, and so we return to the question that the title of this story asks: Aaron Rodgers, the genius who became a mystery. The genius was never in doubt. From the moment he released a football, from the first time he stood under center in a meaningful game and dissected a defense with the calm efficiency of a man solving a puzzle he had already seen, the genius was obvious. It was there in the no-look passes and the off-platform throws and the career passer rating that sits atop the all-time list like a monument to precision. It was there in the way opponents spoke about him, not with bitterness, but with awe. Charles Woodson, who played with Rodgers and against many other quarterbacks across a legendary career, said it simply: the ball came out of his hand differently than anyone else's. That is not analysis, that is testimony. The mystery was never about ability. The mystery was about what Aaron Rodgers wanted and whether he ever truly found it. He wanted championships, but he would not sacrifice his identity to get them the way Brady did. He wanted connection, but he drew boundaries so firm that even his own family could not cross them. He wanted to be understood, but he communicated in riddles, in careful silences, in philosophies that most of his teammates could not follow, and most of the public did not try to. He was the smartest person in every room he entered, and he seemed to know it, and that knowledge, that distance between his mind and the world around it, became the loneliest part of his story. He was the most gifted quarterback who ever played the game. That sentence will provoke debate, and it should, because the men who won more championships earned the right to be in the conversation. But if you strip the position down to its purest elements, the throw, the read, the anticipation, the execution under pressure, no one did it better. No one's arm was more precise. No one's mind processed faster. No one turned the impossible into the routine with the consistency that Aaron Rodgers did for nearly 2 decades. 1 Super Bowl, 4 MVPs, a career passer rating that may never be surpassed, a highlight reel that looks like it was edited by someone trying to prove that football is an art form, and a life that reminds us with quiet insistence that greatness and happiness are not the same thing, that seeing everything on the field does not mean you can see everything off it, that the mind that makes you extraordinary can also make you unknowable. The last image is not from a Super Bowl or an MVP ceremony. It is from a cold night in New Jersey, a man being carted off a field he had barely set foot on, his ankle broken, his comeback over before it began. The stadium lights were still on. The crowd was still murmuring. And somewhere in that silence, the story of Aaron Rodgers, the genius, the mystery, the most talented quarterback who ever lived, was finally, quietly, coming to an end.